News writing is the particular prose style that used for news reporting. The differences between news writing and feature story is in terms of three types. The first one, in terms of introduction. Introduction of news story usually summarize the story in a nutshell. From the introduction, we can know the whole story, even we read the introduction only.
For example, the intro in Malay Mail News, as you can see, they summarize all stories in one paragraph. For example, they say that an elderly man was burned to death in car after the vehicle caught fire in an incident at Jalan Abadi, 9, Taman Malim Jaya, here today.
The second one is from content and the production types. Okay, the content of news story is usually about the recent or current story that just happened or something that we call as breaking news. And the production of news story is within the deadline, because usually news story is produced as soon as possible after the incident happened.
For the content in Cosmo News was breaking news. In Cosmo News, as you can see that the accidents happened at 11:50 a.m. and the news was published at 6:12 p.m. As you can see, they write the news as fast as possible.
And the last one is language and the length of news story. In terms of language, news story use language that more simple and more textual, and the length of news story is around 3 to 500 words only, because the news story is more short rather than feature story.
The example for length and language that used in news story in Metro Harian News. So, you can see that in Metro Harian News, they use around 400 words and use simple language and more factual to make sure that the reader get the information. Feature news is providing the readers more information about a particular aspect of the event or giving them an insight on the issue from different viewpoint or perspective. Characteristic of future story is intro of the future stories. Often has human focus or less an anecdote. Anecdote mean short assuming or interesting story about real incidents or person.
From the example that I attach here, okay, in the introduction basically attract the human interest to make them read more about the future story.
Second characteristic is the production and the content of the future stories. For the content of future stories, any issue that could be news related or human interest. They spend more time to do some research and analysis to produce the future stories.
The example I attach here is about Ma'il Tote that give human interest to reader, because Ma'il Tote is one of the viral story that just happened, and the production of the feature story is about 2 or 3 days after the Ma'il Tote release.
The last characteristic is the length and the language that they use in the future stories. They often use up to 2,000 words and use many descriptions and more colorful language.
The example that I attach here, the story about My Tote is so long rather than the new story that is more short, and the feature story is more long and more flexible language.
The first one is summary lead. Summary lead is most common and traditional lead in journalism. It means to give a quick summary in as few words as possible. It also contains most of 5 W questions, which are who, what, where, why, and when, and also H question, which is how.
Seorang bayi lelaki telah ditemui mati dalam keadaan menyayat hati dalam sebuah guni dengan seluruh tubuhnya dilumuri dengan garam kasar, dipercayai dibunuh oleh bapa kandungnya di kampung Nur.
The headline for Malay news in example 1 is mayat bayi dilumur garam dan disorok dalam guni bawah dapur. This headline is a straightforward one, which means reader will understand a little bit what will talk and what will be story in this news, even though they did not read the whole story yet. That's why this headline called a straightforward headline.
A baby boy named Mohamad, 8 months old, was found dead in a heart-wrenching set inside of sack with rough salt. He is believed to have been killed by his father at Kampung Dua. He had suffered wounds on the left and right of his neck, as well as bruises all over his body. Likewise, the mother of the baby suffered said injuries, was confined in a room by the suspect. The victim's father, believed to suffer from mental problems and could be sentenced to death if convicted guilty.
The lead statement that used in this news is direct lead or straight lead, also called as summary lead. This is by far the most common and traditional version. It is a brief summary containing the 5 W's and H in one sentence.
For example, the lead in this news is volunteer from Pertubuhan Kasih Umat Malaysia under the patronage of Preacher Abid Liu have distributed essential items to frontliners in Sabah.
The headline of this news is Preacher Abid Liu distributes aid to COVID-19 frontliners in Sabah. The most important in this news is the volunteers of Pertubuhan Kasih Umat Malaysia under patronage of Preacher Abid Liu distribute essential items to frontliner at Hospital Lahad Datu, Semporna, Tawau and Kudat.
Secondly, crucial part in this news is Abid Liu distributed 4,000 essential items to Sabah, including personal protective equipment sets, face shield and also shoe covers.
The extra info in this news is they did not face any difficulty while distributing the aid due to good cooperation from the authorities.
Next, we move to second news that we have took from Malay Mail. The lead used in this news is blind identification lead, which is if the person concerned is not well known in the community, her or his name is less important than the salient facts.
The example of lead statement is an elderly man was burned to death in a car after the vehicle caught fire in an incident at Jalan Abadinai, Taman Malim Jaya, here today.
The headline in this news is Police Elderly Man Burns to Death After Car Catches Fire in Melaka. Okay, next, the most important part in this news is the incident happened in the afternoon 31st October 2020 at 1:45 p.m. where a car caught fire in a parking in a residential area which causes death and elderly
man named Lai He Miao, 65 years old.
The crucial info, according to the victim's family member, the victim, who had been receiving mental health treatment at the Pantai Hospital since 2017.
Okay, lastly, extra info from this news is the case is still under the police investigation, and the police said no element of treason and torture.
From the first international news, we found out that the journalist used straight lead in his written news. A straight news lead should be a single paragraph consisting of a single sentence, should contain no more than 30 words, and should summarize at minimum the most newsworthy what, where, and when of the story.
For example, lead in this news is the quake centered in Aegean killed at least 24 people in Turkey and 2 in Greece. So, based on this news, it has the element that describes straight lead or recorded as a summary lead.
The headline of this news is, "In Turkey, a frantic rescue effort after a deadly earthquake."
The most important part in this news highlight about quake that happened on Friday afternoon, centered in Aegean, killed at least 24 people in Turkey and 2 in Greece, while 607 people were injured. So basically, the most important part contained 5 W1H questions that conclude the whole story. Next, the less important info stated more than 1,200 workers were involved in rescue efforts involving at least 13 buildings in Izmir. The quake also rattled several parts of Greece and was felt in Istanbul. The last one is additional info. In August 1998, 7.6 magnitude earthquake in northwestern Turkey caused more than 17,000 people dead and 100,000 displaced. Cause and effect lead. This lead emphasizes on the causes and effects of an action or event.
The example of cause and effect lead based on this news is Khabib Nurmagomedov chokes Justin Gaethje unconscious to retain title, announced retirement following death of his father and coach.
UFC lightweight champion Khabib retires after beating Gaethje. So we can see that the headline is bold and catchy to capture readers' attention.
The most important information from this news is UFC superstar Khabib Nurmagomedov has announced his retirement after defeating Justin Gaethje to successfully defend his lightweight title and retain his perfect record. On getting up, he took off his gloves and left them on the mat. Then he said that it was his last fight in the UFC. This is because his father and also coach to him, Abdullah Nurmagomedov, passed away in July due to complications caused by COVID-19. The crucial information from this news is when Nurmagomedov said in the post-fight interview that he talked to his mother for 3 days before deciding to accept the fight against Gaethje in Yas Island, Abu Dhabi. He had made a deal that it's going to be his last fight due to his father's death. Successfully, Nurmagomedov cemented his claim to be the most dominant MMA fighter of all time with a 29 record. Extra information that we found out from the news is in social media platforms where erupted in celebration and tribute following Nurmagomedov's win and retirement announcement. there were too many congratulation wishes and support from MMA fighters to Nurmagomedov on his achievement in UFC Ultimate Fighting Championship, which has created a record of 29-0 victory.